Hello, hello. Hey, so everybody, can you see me and hear me okay? Go ahead and type in the chat, or you can hop on the mic, or feel free to just give me a thumbs up, as Cynthia just did. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing okay today. And I guess just to get started, get the ball rolling, I guess I wanted to see kind of what background you guys are coming from. Have you guys done a lot with the GRE already? Is it brand new to you or somewhere in between? And feel free to, yeah, if you want to type into the chat, that's fine. So thank you, Cynthia. Brand new, just started today. Okay. All right. Feel free to tell me more about that as we go on. I do want to get to the material, though. Obviously, that's what you guys are here for. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. You could do it again on the mic or in the chat. You can also chat me privately. So there is a private chat option. So you're welcome to use that if you prefer. Anupama saying, yeah, taking GRE again for a better score. All right. So I am Rich Zwelling. I am one of the instructors here at TTP. I've been doing this for quite a bit of time, 16 years now with the GMAT and the GRE together. Did it in New York, did it in Houston. Now I'm outside the Pittsburgh area. So it's been quite a journey. First time, Anita says, all right. And yeah, so this is kind of a taste of what you'll get if you take the class with me, and that class is starting next week. It will be starting on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. So let's dive in and see what we got. And I'm going to introduce you to one of the question types that is on the GRE, but it's not talked about quite as often, which is the critical reasoning question. And the name of the game with a critical reasoning question is you want to kind of break down an argument. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a few example questions and kind of talk them through together. So hopefully everybody can see this slide okay. And let me know if there are any problems, but the question slide is up there right now. And one of the first things that I think is helpful to do, and you know, different people have differing opinions on this, but kind of get an idea of what it is you're supposed to do with the argument in the first place. And that means looking at the question stem. So it says that we're trying to cast the most doubt on the conclusion of the argument above, which means that in essence, what this is called is a weakened question. So we've got some kind of argument at the top, and our job is to figure out the ins and outs of, okay, well, why might this be a faulty argument? Why might it not work out? And the first step to doing that is identifying what the conclusion is. And what we mean when we say conclusion, we're talking about some kind of judgment or opinion, as opposed to a series of premises, which is more like a statement of fact. So if we read this through and we take a few minutes to look at what it says, okay, in the past, most purchasers of automobiles prioritize performance over eco-friendliness when considering which automobile to purchase. Okay, so they like performance more than eco-friendliness. However, in recent years, the percentage of people choosing to purchase the most eco-friendly automobiles has increased significantly. And then we've got this word therefore. Now, they won't be this nice always, but they're giving you a signal there. Because what do you think we're about to get based on what we just talked about and what we kind of mapped out in the question stem? What do you think is going to follow this word therefore? And if you prefer to chat me privately, like I said, you could use the private chat function. And we see a word like therefore. Yeah, I see some people talking about this in the private chat now. So we see therefore, and what we're about to get is really the conclusion, the judgment or opinion that the author is about to make. And let's kind of map this out now, because a lot of people ask me, how should you take notes or not take notes, right? I like to read the argument first and digest it a little bit, then go after the conclusion, which says it must be the case now that more people than ever prioritize eco-friendliness over performance. So we're talking about, okay, prioritize eco-friendliness over performance. And I can use abbreviations as much as I want, right? Might not look exactly like this when you do it, but it's about what they prioritize. And then I also look at premises. So I can say P for premises. And we think about those as more just flat out statements of fact, right? Some evidence that we're going along with. And what's the evidence we have? It says in the second sentence, okay, percentage of people choosing eco-friendly has increased significantly. And this is where you can have a little bit of fun, because now you can take stock in this argument and say, okay, well, in a very broad sense, why might that not be the case? Or what's kind of a hole here? And I wanted to open this up for discussion here. So the only thing I know is that percentage of people choosing eco-friendly automobiles has increased significantly. But then the conclusion I make is that there's a priority here. People are prioritizing eco-friendliness over performance. What do you guys say? If you heard that in the real world, what would you say to it?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, sure. So if you heard that argument here, if I said that, okay, well, the only evidence I have there, the P part, the premise, I know that the percentage of people choosing eco-friendly automobiles has gone up. But the conclusion I make is that they're prioritizing eco-friendliness over performance. And sometimes it can be as simple just to get the ball rolling in the right direction.
Yeah.
Noticing maybe a shift in language. Yeah, somebody about to say something? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just gonna say that it becomes causal, but it's the wrong interpretation.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things to be on the lookout for, and TTP talks quite a bit about this, is the whole idea of a cause and effect relationship. Sometimes also known as, you might have seen this in the real world, right? Correlation versus causation. Okay, so I know that the percentage of people choosing these automobiles has gone up. And I highlighted the word choosing there because is there necessarily a connection here between that and prioritization? And that's kind of the basic assumption I'm making here. What I have to do is I want to notice two ideas that might not necessarily go together. So does choosing something necessarily indicate a priority? Maybe not, right? And you notice how broad and sweeping I'm being here. I'm not getting too specific. I'm not trying to come up with an exact language for the correct answer, but I know that whatever happens here, it's going to have to address this. And a weakener in a very broad sense is going to make me think, okay, yeah, maybe it's true that they're choosing these eco-friendly automobiles, but maybe they are not prioritizing eco-friendliness. All I'm doing is I'm going kind of in the opposite direction. And putting that as my framework helps me when I go into the answer choices, because it's going to help me get rid of answers quickly that I know are either irrelevant or go in the wrong direction. So I would look at something like answer choice A, for example. It says automobiles are on average more eco-friendly than they were in the past. What do we think? Does that work for me? Does it not work for me? Is that going to weaken, not weaken?
Out of scope.
Okay, and so something about out of scope. Right now, I really like to shift the language when we talk about whether something is relevant or irrelevant. I like to talk about that because everything is going to sound out of scope when you first read it. I mean, there's no way you could have known this. A lot of people use the term out of scope, but I want to focus more on is relevancy. So it says that automobiles on average are more eco-friendly than they were in the past. The problem here is that, okay, what I care about is the priorities. Remember, I'm trying to get at this idea that I am prioritizing eco-friendliness. And A doesn't even begin to address that. So I would say that that is irrelevant. Doesn't really matter to the argument because it doesn't tell me anything about the priorities. Any of these other chancers that seem open to attack?
The one right after it.
Okay, so Ansh is saying the one right after that. So we're looking at B, and why? I mean, if we look at B, tell me more about why that's going to go away.
Yeah, again, I would say out of scope, but again, very relevant.
But it's tempting, isn't it? Because one of the things that wrong answers do is they often prey on your real world knowledge, right? You read this public transportation thing, and it's more eco-friendly than even the most eco-friendly automobile, right? But the problem is again, that's irrelevant to this discussion. It does point to a potential like more eco-friendly method. But again, what about people's priorities? Are people prioritizing eco-friendliness or not? That doesn't give me any information. Now, somebody's saying something interesting about the third one. Somebody's saying in private that the third one might actually support or strengthen rather than weaken it. So what if we find out that people are generally more aware of the ecological effects of automobile use than they were in the past? Well, if anything, yeah, that might be on the way to strengthening the idea. Maybe it's more likely that people prioritize eco-friendliness. And that's kind of the opposite of what, right? We're trying to weaken this idea, and we're trying to get at this idea that maybe people are not prioritizing eco-friendliness. So if anything, C is on its way to being the strengthener. And then there were two. Okay. So what do we think? This is where I'm going to open it up to a poll. You can chat me privately, but what do you think? Are we going to go with D here, or are we going to go with E?
I think I'm gonna go with the last answer choice just because similarly I feel like saying that currently many of the most eco-friendly new automobiles are also the highest performing new automobiles. I feel as though it's just like I don't know the word I'm looking for.
Well, try to frame it in terms of the weakener we came up with at the bottom right, because we're trying to say, oh, even though this is true, that people are purchasing more eco-friendly automobiles, maybe that means they're not necessarily prioritizing eco-friendliness, right? So what
Yeah.
does E open the door for us thinking? Yeah, so the question was like, how does answer choice E kind of open the door to think about, oh, maybe it's not prioritizing eco-friendliness, right?
Because it's just happening by chance, like it's randomly that, the automobiles are also the highest performing one. It's not like they're
Yeah.
actually going out there and prioritizing going after thing A. It's just like
Yeah.
happening by chance that it
Yeah,
happens
Christian's
to be
got
just
this.
because of it.
Yeah, Christian's got this. And if any of you were thinking the same thing, then you were right. It's the idea that, okay, well, what this opens the door for us thinking is maybe people still prioritize performance because it just happens to be that all these eco-friendly automobiles are also the highest performing ones. Or maybe it's something totally different. Right. Maybe it's just the idea that it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with eco-friendliness. That's not the priority. And that's why it's going to be our winner. But that, of course, opens the door to the question of, okay, well, why not D? Now, it is tricky because it gives us a third factor, right? This idea that durability is the most important quality, right? Okay, well, that may be the most important quality that they're thinking about, right? But again, do they prioritize eco-friendliness, right? So durability might be the most important quality, but do they prioritize it over performance? That's the real question here. And it's tricky, but D is not going to be able to tell me anything about that. And this process is the one that you want to kind of refine. And we're going to talk a lot about this when we do it in the course, right? So this is just the start. If you didn't get every part of this right now, that's perfectly fine. But I wanted to open up the door for any questions before we kind of turn it over to another question and have you guys try to do this on your own.
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
So why can't they prioritize durability just like they prioritize high performing?
Well, they can prioritize durability, but the problem is is that let us know anything about this specific instance. They prioritize eco-friendliness over performance, right? Now, can I say anything about that one way or the other, just knowing that durability is the most important quality? So eco-friendly and performance might be lower on the list for them, but which one is higher? Is it eco-friendliness or performance? I don't know. Just knowing the durability is at the top doesn't tell me anything about these specific two priorities. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, cool. So let's
I
go
actually have a
to,
quick
yeah.
question. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
When setting up the framework, I particularly like how you did that. What does the P? Sorry, I was like doing a few things, so I didn't see what the P stood for. I know C is conclusion.
Yeah, and I'll say that like here, premise.
Premise.
And
Okay.
premise is going to be something that is a statement of fact,
Okay.
as opposed to a conclusion, which is more like a judgment or opinion, right?
Yeah.
So the author just gives us this fact that this percentage has gone up. That's not an opinion of any sorts. He's just presenting to us that to us as a piece of data.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so I want to open up the door for you guys to do the next one on your own. And yeah, so see what you do with it. I'll be curious to see what you guys come up with. You can chat me privately with your answer. All right, good luck. Okay, so we've had a little bit of time to read this through, give it a shot. So what I'd like to see you guys do is chat me privately and tell me what you think the correct answer is, even if it's just a guess, because I want to see kind of how we're thinking as a group. And we will come back in 5, in 4, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's do this. So we got quite a few votes here now. That's good. And as of now, we're a little bit torn. So I see that we've got representations. We got a little love for C and a little love for E. Okay. So it is one of those two. I will confirm it. But let's see if you broke down this argument the way we were talking about before. Because if we want to do this, right now, first of all, this is an assumption question, which is a little bit different, but I wanted to give you guys a crack at it. But the process is going to be the same because we want to identify what the conclusion is. So we read this through, we find the judgment or opinion. And where is that? What is the judgment or opinion? You can just give me the first few words.
The conclusion, you said judgment. Well, the conclusion is after the therefore, so we will begin to see the number of locusts in our town decrease, and the judgment or premise effective immediately. All farmers in our town are required to plant only genetically engineered crops that produce BT,
Yeah.
biotoxin, which kills locust. And I voted for the last answer choice.
You voted for E. Okay, cool. So yeah, so first things first, as Christian pointed out, where's the conclusion? Where's the judgment or opinion? That's going to be at the end after the word therefore. Now, even if the word therefore weren't there, because sometimes they won't be that nice, I could still identify this as a conclusion because that's the judgment call on the part of the author. The conclusion is going to be that the number of locusts will decrease. And what I've seen some people like to do to be kind of visual about it, do a little downward arrow, and we want to pay attention to every little word, every little part of it. It says over the coming growing season. That could be important. That's our judgment call, judgment or opinion. And it's on the basis of what basic idea? Okay, well, effective immediately, we've got this requirement to plant only stuff with BT biotoxin. Okay, and what we can do is say, okay, at the very least, we know where this is coming from. And if there's an assumption to be made here, now what I didn't tell you about, because I wanted to see what you guys did with it, but what is an assumption in essence? You can think of it as a link between the premises and the conclusion, a necessary link. You could also think of it as something that the arguer must believe in order for the argument to make sense. So if there's this requirement in place, and I'm concluding that the number of locusts is going to go down, in a basic sense, what am I assuming? That this requirement is actually going to lead to that decrease, right? That there's no other factor here that might actually put that into question. So I take a look at some of these other options. Now, I'm glad that nobody chose any of the other ones, but let's take a look. Answer choice A, the town could not find a more effective method for controlling locust populations, right? This is a pretty popular answer choice, not unlike the durability answer choice on the previous one, this third method, right? Or different method. Well, just because there's a more effective method doesn't tell us anything about whether this method will work or not. This method could still work, even if there's a more effective one. Answer choice B, irrelevant. I don't care about what it does to insects other than locusts. Remember, don't say out of scope, you want to say irrelevant. I care about whether the locust population is actually going to go down. Answer choice D. So the birds that eat the locust will not come to town and wipe out the town's locust population. Okay, well, what do we think about that one? This one's a little sneaky, but what did you guys make a decision about with regards to D? And think about it in the way that I was just framing it before. Because I said that it's something the arguer must believe, right? There's definitely a causal element here. David's saying causation, right? So there's this causal idea that the birds could come and eat the locusts, right? But again, if I think of it from the vantage point of whether the arguer has to believe it or not, do I have to believe that birds won't eat the locusts. Do I have to believe that? Because the only thing I care about here is that I have this requirement to plant the BT biotoxin plants. And I'm saying because of that, the number of locusts is going to go down. Okay, well, whether birds do that or don't do that, do I have to believe that birds won't eat the locusts? No, that's not something that I have to believe. And now we're down to 2, which is the 2 you guys chose. So we go through these, we look at answer choice C. It says, locusts gather in large swarms when they feed, quickly destroying acres of crops. Okay, well, kind of what you want to be on the lookout for is an answer choice that kind of just confirms or accentuates something you already know. We already know that the locusts are destructive. That's something we already know. But it's irrelevant here, not just because we already know it, but what does it say about the likelihood that the requirement for BT biotoxin will lead to locust decrease? I have no idea, right? It just confirms that locusts do something pretty destructive. And that just leaves us with E, which kind of slips under the radar when you first read it. But not all crops to be planted during the coming season have already been planted. And it's to be planted during the coming growing season, right? If I'm interested in during the coming growing season, well, what if I find out that they've all been planted already? Well, what does that do for me? Well, the problem here is that if they've already been planted, that means basically, in a way, no more plants will be planted after the requirement is put in place. Well, if I have this requirement and nobody plants anything anymore, it doesn't matter that I have the requirement, right? Nobody's going to be planting anything, so it doesn't matter. So that is something that the arguer has to believe. The arguer has to believe, in so many words, that there are going to be more crops coming. And what makes answer choice E so tricky, as so many other answer choices, is that it has kind of a double negative situation. Not all crops have already been planted. Fancy way of saying, oh, well, there are going to be more crops planted this season. That's something the arguer has to believe. Does that make sense? So let me know if you have any questions about that. But you notice how this process is the same, whether it's assumption, could be a weaken, could be a strengthen, a number of other. This basic framework of going after the conclusion as quickly as possible, that's going to be what helps you. All right. Now we're kind of at the halfway point, so we'll switch gears a little bit and we'll do some stuff with Quant. And I wanted to talk specifically about number properties, but I wanted to kind of highlight it in such a way that it gets at these types of questions that really test your reasoning skills and your attention to detail, and not necessarily like hardcore number crunching or memorizing a lot of formulas, because that's how they're going to make the questions trickier. So if you've never seen a question like this before, what you're going to be given is a piece of information here, and then you're going to be given 2 quantities, and your job is to determine which one is bigger. And it could be that either one is bigger or the other. Those are answer choices A and B, you notice here. Or answer choice C says, actually, they're equal. And there's also this possibility with answer choice D that you can't tell. And you want to be open to that as much as possible. And you notice there's nothing inherently complicated about these expressions. They're simple expressions, but it's the logic and the reasoning behind it that's going to prove kind of tricky. Like at the very outset, what they tell us, so they give us a fact, a premise, if you will, that we accept as true, that 0 is less than x is less than y. So that means that x and y are both positive numbers, and y is the bigger number. Okay. So for those of you who have seen something like this before, I'm curious, how would we approach this? Because I see these 2 quantities, it might not be immediately apparent how I'm supposed to compare them. Or if you have no idea, you can say, I have no idea.
I could be wrong, but how I would first tackle this question is I'd make it easier on myself by choosing the numbers, like just choosing numbers for X and Y to make it like a little easier, and then I will test it in each of the variables to then compare it to see if
Yeah.
A is greater or B is greater and or equal.
Now, Christian's getting at something I wanted to talk about here, which is the idea of testing numbers, which can be handy. It doesn't always work. It's not a catch-all, but in some cases it can really help. So what if I test values for X and Y? And if I were to do that, Christian, like what could I throw in there for X and Y? I got to make sure it follows the rules, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, to make it simple, since, X is bigger than 0, you can do 1. And since Y is bigger than X, you can do 2, and vice versa. You could do 2 for X, 3 for Y. So,
Yeah, so you start basic.
Yeah.
And you just say, okay, I'm going to see where this is going to go, right? Let's see if X is 1 and Y is 2, what exactly is going to happen here. So I throw those in and I see what quantity A ends up being. And I don't have to jump ahead too far. I don't have to rush. Don't have to do this as quickly as possible, right? The idea is to be accurate as well. So I literally just throw those numbers here and I see what I get. I get 1 minus 3, which is -2. And I'm going to divide that by 2 minus 3, which is -1. So in this case, with these numbers, I get that it ends up being 2. Okay, and then I go over here to quantity B and I do the same thing. X is 1, Y is 2, same numbers. Well, in that case, X over Y is going to be equal to 1/2, just 1 divided by 2. So what's the significance here? Okay, I got a 2 on the left in quantity A. I got a 1/2 on the right. It's pretty clear that quantity A is bigger. 2 is bigger than 1/2. But then you got to put on the brakes for a minute. Because just because you get one outcome doesn't mean that outcome is going to be the same all the time. And what Christian suggested is absolutely right. What if I switch gears here and I do X equals 2 and Y equals 3? Now, the thing I want to be careful of, and this is the kind of attention to detail that they'll test you on, why can I not do this? I'm actually not allowed to do this. And I can tell pretty quickly if you know what to look for. Why is it that this is not allowed?
is it because and this is me guessing, is it because in quantity A, it would be 3 minus 3 equals 0?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Christian's catching on pretty well. If you didn't catch on to this, that's totally fine. But I want to give people a chance, right? But yeah, if I plug in, 3 here for the denominator, this is going to be 2 minus 3 over 3 minus 3. So I can tell right away that this is illegal because I can't divide by 0. Okay, so that's not allowed. No problem though, because I can move on. And I can say, all right, what if I did something like, okay, let's just bump it up to the next one. X equals 3 and Y equals 4. So now what I'm looking at is 3 minus 3 in the top. And in the bottom, I'm going to have 4 minus 3. But in the top, I'm going to have 0. Bottom's going to be 1. Doesn't matter, though, because the result here is 0. And what do I get over here? Okay, well, if I go again with X equals 3 and Y equals 4, now all of a sudden, X over Y is equal to 3/4. Now which one's bigger? Uh-oh. What just happened? Anybody else besides me? Yeah, go ahead.
Quantity B is bigger.
But because I did that, and because in the previous case, I found out that A was bigger, what I've basically just proved here is that the answer has to be what? What's the answer or the final answer to this problem out of these 4?
The last relationship cannot be determined.
Because it could go one direction or the other. And the big lesson, besides the testing numbers thing, another big lesson to take away from this that I think is important is always have D in mind, right? It could be that you can't tell. And I think a lot of people when they're first doing these questions think that, it has to be A or B or equal. I mean, they must have done something wrong if it goes 2 ways, but that's exactly the point. If you prove that it could go one direction or another, the answer is D. That's it. Okay, questions about that? Okay, cool. So,
Can I
get
ask a
to-
quick question about
oh
that?
yeah,
Actually?
yeah, sure.
So, at what point would you stop, I guess, testing numbers? For example, like, so for quantity A, how, quantity A was bigger at first, and obviously, like, you want to keep D in mind always. Would you just keep going until you try to work to get the inverse? Like, at what point would you stop? Like, for example, if 3/4, if quantity A was bigger, would you just like keep going? Because I know you're supposed to there's a time limit, so I don't.
There's a time limit, but also you would try to notice a pattern. Like if you kept getting the same results, right? Like if you got 2 or 3 times in a row, you got the same result, like greater than, like quantity A is always bigger, then it's going to be a hint that quantity A is likely bigger. So you can't prove it with just one example, but if you do it a few times and you continue to get kind of the same result over and over again, then you know that, okay, well, I mean, then it's probably going to go this way.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but the other thing I'll add to that, by the way, is you never want to forget about some common values. So don't forget about -1, 0, and 1. A lot of times people forget to test those because they have identity properties. They're easy to slip under the radar. Never forget that in some cases, 0 is a possible value. It doesn't work here because they tell us that X and Y are both bigger than 0. But in another situation, who knows? 0 and 1, -1 could be legal values.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So now we're going to go to this one. And I kind of want to open the door to you guys on this one as well to talk about what number properties we're dealing with here, because part of it is one of my favorites, which is prime numbers. And how do we define a prime number in general? Back to basics here, right? Close. Now, it does have, I mean, 2 is part of it, depending on the number. But the most complete definition for a prime number is that it is a number that has, normally, so I'm seeing somebody say what we normally think about it, which is that only 1 in the number itself is a factor. Okay, so I would say to that, okay, so 1 is prime, right? Because 1 only has 1 in itself as a factor, right? That check out? A little bit of a trick question. Because no, false. 1 is not prime because, oops, sorry, I highlighted there. The most complete definition for a prime number is that it's a number that has exactly 2 factors. We think of that as the 1 in itself, right? But we've got to mention that it has to be exactly 2. So 1 is not prime because it has only 1 factor. Why is it that way? I don't know, it's just the definition, right? But it makes everything a lot easier to think about it this way. A prime number has exactly 2 factors. Okay, so it says that X and Y are distinct prime numbers less than 10. And I want to know what must be true about the product. In other words, if I multiply X and Y together. So what's the most efficient thing to do here? Well, on any given problem, sometimes a little brute force is okay because, I mean, are there many prime numbers less than 10? Not really, right? And what are those numbers? Just opening up. Do you guys remember what are the prime numbers that are less than 10? Okay, Cynthia's got one idea. Do we agree, disagree? David's got the same idea. Anita, we seem to be in agreement so far, and I would agree as well. Yeah, 2, 3, 5, and 7. Don't forget, not only is 1 not prime, but 2 is prime, and it is the only even prime, because every other even number is going to be divisible by 2. So these are my options here. I mean, X and Y has to be from this. And I also know it's important to notice that it says distinct. So they're going to be different. That doesn't leave me with many combinations. But what I'm being asked about is what has to be true. And you notice that one of the other number properties they test here is the idea of even versus odd. Answer choices A and B say, oh, okay, well, do they have to be even? Do they have to be odd if I multiply these together? Okay, and it helps to know in this case what would make that happen. And some of you might know this, but starting with answer choice A, X, Y is even. Okay, so does that have to be true? What do you think? Got to vote for no, it does not have to be true. David says no. Okay, well, what's your evidence for that? Why are you saying that it doesn't have to be true? Some people are starting to come up with just some examples here. So, I mean, among these numbers, I can choose any two I want. Yep, David, same thing, exactly. So I could just have 3 times 5. And that gets me 15, which is odd, okay? And that is just one counterexample, but one counterexample is enough. It's kind of cool to point out that when you have this language here, it makes sense in hindsight's 2020, right? But if it says must be true, that means 100% of the time. Okay, no question about it. So if it's got to be true 100% of the time, that means all I need is one counterexample to show that it does not have to be true. And I just found that. 3 times 5 is 15, out of there. So that's no good. What about answer choice B? It says X times Y is odd. Okay, well, I just found a case in which it's odd, 3 times 5, but does that mean it's always odd? So could I disprove it with another example here? If X times Y is going to be odd, does it have to be odd, or is there a counterexample? Well, I can take a look at that 2, for example, and pair it with anything I want. It turns out that if I multiply 2 by any one of these, I'm going to end up with an even number. So I could take 2 and let's just do 3. It makes it easy, right? But 2 times 3 is 6, and that's even, which means that I've just found another counterexample, right? X times Y does not have to be odd. It could be an even number like 6. Okay, so that's out. And then we got answer choice C that says that X times Y is less than 0. Now, in terms of number properties, this is actually telling you something right away. If I multiply 2 numbers together and I get something that is less than 0, in other words, it's a negative result. Has anybody seen this before? What does that mean about the relationship between X and Y? Or you can say, I don't know. No problem.
It's positive, one's negative.
Let's see. Who was that? Didn't light up, but yes.
That was me, Ansh.
Ansh, yeah, you're right. And David's got this too, right? The only way I multiply 2 numbers together and get a negative result is if it is positive times negative or negative times positive. They have opposite signs. Okay, can that work here? Does that have to be true? And you might be asking yourselves, well, can prime numbers be negative? No, they cannot. It turns out that they're always positive. We know that 2, 3, 5, and 7 are our only options. So not only does answer choice C not have to be true, it turns out that it's never true. So we've just gotten rid of 3, right? We're never going to have a positive times a negative. It's always going to be positive times positive. So now we got these last 2 to deal with, and we've got something a little bit more specific because we're framing it in terms of 6 and 36, right? So now I'll open it up to you guys again and say, okay, well, which one is the winner here? Which one is going to be correct? Is it going to be D or E? Getting a couple votes in here for D in the public chat. One more. David, Angela, Anita, all saying D. Yep. And I'm seeing some good logic on this too. So we're all in agreement that it's D. It seems you guys have latched onto this, because what I notice here is that even at its highest, right, if I max this out, it's going to be 5 times 7 or 35. Okay, well, if that's the maximum product that I could get, then everything has to be less than 36, no doubt about it. Whereas in answer choice E, again, all I need is one counterexample. It turns out, interestingly enough, they're all above 6 except for 1. And one counterexample is all you need. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. It's not greater than 6. So, done and done. Whoops. There we go. So any questions about that? Beautiful. All right. Got one more problem, and I want you guys to try it on your own before we discuss it. I don't care if you don't understand every little part of it. Give it your best shot. And feel free to chat me in the private chat if you need some kind of hint or something like that if you're stuck. Here we go. Good luck with it. We'll be back. All right, let's come back and talk about this. So get in your final vote, see what you got. What do you think? We are coming back in 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1. Okay, so yeah, all right, now starting to see some answers. And yeah, what's going to be the winner here? So we got a split here. And this is kind of deliberate because this tests your attention to detail. Now, first of all, let's go through it. I know that we sold this thing for $240 and we got a profit of 20% on it. Okay, so what you can do here is say, all right, I have $240, right? That's what I sold it for. And then it's pretty simple to think, okay, well, because I got a profit of $20. Now, I'm a very visual person. I like to do this non-algebraically or non-equation form if you can. You'll learn that about me because it kind of trains you to think more critically about what's going on with the numbers. But I bump this up by 20%. And 20% is the same thing as 1/5 of the number. Now, by the way, you will have a calculator on the GRE. So you could crunch the numbers here on your own, but you could also just go to the calculator. It's kind of cool to know that you can do that, save any like arithmetic errors. And if I do that, I realize that I'm adding exactly $48. I don't care about this as much for this problem, but the total would then be $288. And that would lead us to answer choice C, right? However, quite a few of you did not choose C. Why not? And lest you be confused about this, I'm asking the question because you guys were right. You guys were right not to choose C. So if I do it this way, and all the math looks like it's fine, I mean, what did I mess up? Must be something conceptual, right? And the problem here, I mean, if you're typing or you want to hop on the mic, that's cool, right? But the problem here is I'm assuming that I'm adding the 20% to the selling price, right? Is that how I get the profit? Right? This seems kind of, again, hindsight 2020 and kind of obvious, right? But this is why I'm a visual person as well. Because the actual relationship I want is this. The selling price is, $240. And whatever price that I purchased it at, that's going to go up by the 20% to get to the $240. Very easy mistake to make, right? And again, this is less about formulas and like fancy number crunching. It's about attention to detail and understanding conceptually what's going on. So then I would have to say, all right, well, here's my, let's say, purchase price. I can call that P for purchase price. It's going to go up by 20%. And profit equals revenue minus cost in general. Yep. But to get the profit, all I need to do is say, okay, well, how much did I purchase the thing for? That's my cost. And 240 is going to be my revenue. Now, to increase the number by 20%, this is something we'll cover more in detail in the percent lesson, but it's taking the original amount and I'm going to add 0.2p or 20% to get to 240, right? And that basically is the same thing as saying 1p plus 0.2p. So I get that 1.2p, adding them together, is equal to 240. And if I did the number crunching there, what I would find out is that what is the profit going to end up being? So if I crunch the numbers here and I say, okay, well, what do I end up getting? Anybody want to throw this in here? What do I get? Yep, Cynthia's got it. I end up getting 200, and that is the purchase price. And another reason why I like to be visual is it reminds me what's what. That purchase price is 200. Now, the question is about the profit. So how much profit did I actually make? $40, going up to 240. And that lets me know, whoops, over here, please, thank you, that actually in this case, quantity B is bigger. Why won't you go down here? There we go. Quantity B is bigger because 48 is bigger than 40, right? But they're trying to sucker you into thinking that 48 is the answer if you make that mistake we made at the beginning. So this right here is the wrong way to do it. And this is the right way to do it. Pretty cool, right? That's pretty much it. Awesome. It was great to guide you guys through this session. And I want to do, if you don't have any other questions, feel free to ask if you do, but some little housekeeping here, some stuff about what to do from here. I will be starting this class on Tuesday. And we'll get started with just kind of an intro to the test, kind of get our feet wet a little bit slowly, by, like a little bit by bit. And one of the first quant lessons is going to be one on algebra, linear, and quadratics. And we'll start talking about the different question types on the verbal as well. But I'm going to throw some links here into the chat that you can use. So you have a landing page where you can get access to all this stuff. You have the link with LiveTeach sessions, so you can sign up for them there. You got the registration plan and or registration page, and you've also got the plans page where you can choose a plan. Now, the other thing I would include though is that if you do the course, if you sign up for the course, you get access to TTP for free, the TTP platform. You won't have to pay any extra cost for that. All right, so that's pretty cool. And that's worth a $400 value, so not bad. And there's also a code you can use to get a discount. Let me pull that up right now and copy it and paste it so you can use it. Discount code /30, and that is 30% off. Yeah, so this is a good question. If you already have TTP Premium, then one thing we can talk about is maybe crediting some of that as going towards the class. And you can certainly send us a message about that and we can work out something. We're flexible on that. And let me know if you need me to get those links again, and I can throw them at the bottom of the chat. Yeah, and just for fun, I guess, as we close things up, is where you guys signed in from? What area of the world? So we got a little bit, yeah, we got some international. Cynthia's from the UK. New York City, that's my old stomping ground. Ghana, all right. A couple from Ghana, nice. Still have not had a chance to visit West Africa. I really want to go though. Indianapolis. Awesome, okay. Well, cool. We'll close things up now. And yeah, somebody's asking about how the purchase price is $200. So yeah, I mean, Christian, you were asking me about this. Sure. Do you need any clarification on something specific? Happy to kind of walk through it.
Yeah, so I don't want to hold everyone up, but I did it the first way. So I actually was a part of the group that thought the answer was C. And what I did was found 20% of 240. And I guess that was kind of a trap answer. But
Yeah.
I'm looking at the resolution here and the purchase price 200. I think it's just a little muddy, like that section for me, like in my brain.
Sure. So what I was trying to get at here is the idea that P is the purchase price. I've got to add 20% to that because that's where I'm getting my profit. 240 is the selling price, right? But I've got to go from the purchase price to the selling price, and that's where the increase of 20% happens.
Oh, okay. I got it. That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I figure out, then it makes sense when I see the number 200. I bump that up by 1/5. 1/5 of 200 is 40. So I bump it up by 40.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
No, I'm all good, man. Thank you for this. Take care.
Yeah, no problem. Take care. Yeah, and if anybody else needs to take off, that's cool.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. I will see you guys later. Have a good rest of the week. And hopefully I will see you in class on Tuesday. Take care.